So, good evening, everyone. I'm Adam Chamberlain, and I'm the current board chair of GBF. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here tonight to thank you for joining us for this exclusive webinar celebrating 25 years of water protection work that you have made possible. For those of you who don't know me, I'm very fortunate that my family has been on the bay for over 100 years. We call the Honey Harbor Cognoscine area our home. One of my first memories of Georgian Bay is of fishing in a canoe with my grandmother, Margaret Saunderson, who was also fished as a young girl when she was named Margaret Smith. I think I was about 4 years old at the time, and we caught what seemed to me anyways to be a massive pike. So the bay has been a huge part of my life and the life of my family over that time. I couldn't imagine a summer without the peace and beauty of the bay, and look forward to each and every time we get there. It's a special place. That said, the bay is facing major threats, some seen and felt, others invisible to the eye. These threats are monumental and potentially catastrophic, including devastating swings in highs and lows of water levels, toxic chemicals leaching into our water, raw sewage overflows at times, climate change, and the increasing presence of invasive species. Each of these has the ability to decimate the water and damage the iconic shorelines we know so well. With your support and belief in our mission and vision, Georgian Bay Forever's initiatives to combat these threats are able to be far more effective than might be expected for a small, locally based charity like ours. Well, 25 years is a huge milestone for Georgian Bay Forever, and we are proud to have accomplished so much in that time. GBF has continuously raised the bar, but we aren't finished yet. Thanks to the hard work and visionary mindset of our committed a group of board members, staff, strategic partners, donors, like each of you, and volunteers, we are able to bring cutting edge technologies and out of the box thinking to our work to protect life and the waters of Georgian Bay. One such visionary I'm proud to introduce is David Sweetnam, Executive Director, who some of you probably know. Before joining GBF, David was an entrepreneur who spent his career in environment and high-tech industries. He's always been interested in protecting the environment through sound business practices to yield smaller footprint and sustainable outcomes. David is focused on research and education. His business ventures have included the first GREEN, that's an acronym, GREEN, chemical drum recycling program, and state-of-the-art atmospheric instrumentation development to monitor UV levels and the ozone hole, resulting in the UV index program in Canada, US, Australia, and many other countries. David has a BSc in biochemistry from the University of Waterloo, where I spent a few years studying environmental studies myself. He has spent decades canoeing, camping, and boating throughout Georgian Bay and its waterways, starting at summer camp as a teen and then as a youth worker on Beausoleil Island for Parks Canada in the Conservation Corps. David has 4 children and spends summers on the water in Georgian Bay. Once again, it is my pleasure to now pass this webinar over to you. Thanks, David.
Thank you very much, Adam, and good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this evening as we kick off our celebrations of 25 years of Georgian Bay Forever. We've done a lot of work in that time. Back in 1995, the organization was spun out of the Georgian Bay Association, the umbrella group for the cottage associations along the coast of Georgian Bay, and became a standalone full-fledged charity so that it could raise money for scientific research and doing public education to help protect the waters of Georgian Bay. And in those first years, water levels were starting to decline. And one of the first major studies that was undertaken by the organization was funded in 2004, came to be known as the Baird study, and it was looking at the changes in the St. Clair River following the 1960s dredging operations that occurred to deepen the channel for the seaway. I was invited to join the organization as the first full-time staff member and executive director in 2009, and it's been my privilege to be able to lead the organization ever since in its growth and development. I'm just going to start this progression of projects that we've undertaken in our first 25 years, and you'll see certainly we've been a busy organization for a small group of dedicated staff and volunteers. We've grown our staff now to 4.5 people, and we spend all of our time focused on the research projects to make a difference and protect the waters of Georgian Bay. Most excitingly, recently, we've been able to, through a partnership with 3 other universities, acquire an autonomous underwater vehicle, which I'll show you some pictures of in a minute, to undertake with the University of Toronto a really important project that we call Divert and Capture, which is looking at capturing microfibers and keeping them out of our water. Our coastal Phragmites protection strategy has now evolved into an eradication strategy because the success we're having, we really do believe it is possible, since we started so early in the infestation, to literally eradicate this weed from our waters, our coastal waters. We're working with Environment and Climate Change Canada, doing some work on coastal wetlands resilience to climate change. We're looking at a project in the town of Collingwood to install some sea bins, and we've actually just started talking to a couple of other organizations, including the Council of the Great Lakes Region and Pollution Probe, to participate in a project that they started called the Great Lakes Plastic Cleanup Initiative, and Georgian Bay Forever is really excited to bring the Georgian Bay community into that project with the partnerships that will already have been established by Georgian Bay Forever over the last 25 years. And of course, with COVID and this new reality of physical distancing and isolating ourselves from one another, we've started to undertake now a program of educational webinars, and I'll talk about the success of one of our first webinars in a few minutes. So, kicking off some of the amazing partners that we've been able to work with over the last few years. NASA is a very well-recognized name, I'm sure, to everyone on the call. And we were able to get them to turn their satellites to face the Earth and actually investigate what was happening to our coastal wetland inventory using some really amazing science back in 2014. And we looked at two different years, 1987 when water levels were high and 2013 when water levels were at an extreme low, in order to see what was happening or what would happen to the wetland inventory. And one of the really amazing things that we found in this study was that the north part of Georgian Bay, imagine a line between Tobermory and Parry Sound, north of that actually acted in a completely inverse way to the southern part of Georgian Bay. As water levels declined in the north, we got a gain in wetlands, and in the south, we were seeing a loss of wetlands. So that was a really interesting and unique finding that hadn't been brought to any of the literature that we'd seen to date. Another study that we completed was with AECOM Engineering. The International Joint Commission did a study back in 2012 on the Upper Great Lakes. And in that study, they posed a question as to whether or not structures could be of assistance in mitigating the impacts of climate change in the Upper Great Lakes. So we simply put that question to a team of experts led by Dr. Mike Donohue, who formerly did lead the science panel for the International Joint Commission. And we asked the question, and the group came back after investigating globally the structures that were in place for water management and said, yes, in fact, there could be some positive benefits to looking at structures in the Upper Great Lakes. We provided this study to the International Joint Commission to help them in their deliberations on how to respond to the changes that we are seeing and expect to see in the future. I mentioned the AUV, the Autonomous Underwater Vehicle. This is an amazing tool. It's about a $350,000 tool, which would have taken Georgian Bay Forever quite a few years to raise the money for. But as I mentioned, in partnership with the universities, we were able to pool our money and bring this amazing water quality device into the waters of Georgian Bay. So we are uniquely positioned now to do a lot of science in the water. We had a contest to name this ship device, and we call it Georgie McBayface, GBF, as our acronym kind of built into the name. And so that affectionately allows us to go out and speak to school kids and younger people about the science that we're doing to protect the water, which ultimately they'll inherit from us. It also is quite an efficient tool because in an area where we would normally have to take our boat out and do multiple passes to investigate what was going on as far as the bathymetry goes, if you notice this section in kind of the left corner of the the waterway here, there's numerous passes back and forth and crisscrossing. Instead of all of those passes, the new AUV device will allow us to cover that space in a mere 4 passes. And again, autonomously. And these are actually the very first images to come out of Georgie. And you can see the great amount of detail that we can see on the bottom of the waterway there. So this information is passed on to Environment and Climate Change Canada already, and it is being used in the development of an electronic or digital model of the actual lake bed. When we as staff in Georgian Bay Forever look at the water, it's not just the shining beautiful surface and the sunsets or sunrises that we see. We actually see many of the potential impacts that can hurt our waters. So we're often just absorbed thinking about things like garbage getting into the water and microplastics, nutrients that are ending up getting washed into our bay with increasing frequency due to the larger storms that we're experiencing, and invasive species. And so as we start to approach each of those concerns or problems, we try to develop programs to connect our communities and our bay. And one of the very first programs that we were able to develop and involve the community with started back in 2011, and we call it frag busting or frag busters. So this is a group of the community that come out and help us manage the invasive Phragmites plant and remove it from our coastal waterways to protect the habitats for the numerous species that use our wetlands, both aquatic and terrestrial species, some of which are threatened or endangered in Georgian Bay. To give you an idea of the effectiveness of this program, which doesn't use any chemicals, it's 100% human powered. This is a view of a place called Turkey Island down near, or a Wild Goose Island, sorry, down near Honey Harbor. And in the distance, you'll just see kind of the shade of a red roof. This was what the stand looked like at the beginning of 2018 when our students showed up to do the cutting. And this is what it looked like this year when our students went back to the same location in order to do the cutting for this year. Very few stalks of Phragmites remained, and the few that were there, of course, our students made short work of. Now, sometimes some of the stands are a little bit too large for the community to undertake on its own. And so I'll just play this sequence. You can see in the foreground the dense stand of Phragmites that was completely taking over the whole wetland there. We brought in these floating tractors with cutting blades on the front end called truck saws, and we were able to remove the invasive species and return that wetland to its native state. And in fact, last year, we had some nesting ducks back in. The communities, we have about 24 different communities organizing frag cuts from Collingwood all the way up through to the North Channel. We've created 9 partnerships specifically looking at working with Phragmites, including organizations like the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. We also realized that some pollution was getting into the water in the form of cigarette butts. These, in fact, are carrying chemicals. Chemicals that are filtered out of the cigarette smoke make their way into the water when the cigarette butts are thrown on the street, washed into the storm sewer, and then washed right out into our bay. So we wanted to figure out how to keep them out of the water. We partnered with the Lake Huron Coastal Center that had a program called Butt Free Beach down in Wasaga Beach. They needed some help with communications and marketing and funding. And so we partnered with them to implement this solution to keep the cigarette butts out of the water. One of the other problems that we started to see was some research suggesting that tap water, municipally processed tap water, and beers that were made in the Great Lakes using the lake water actually were containing microfibers. So when you go to the tap and pour a glass or get a glass of water out of the tap, that water in fact was containing these microfibers. And we, through the literature, realized that a lot of it was coming from clothing. We partnered with the University of Toronto, and we installed filters on washing machines in 100 homes up in Parry Sound in a little experiment that we designed with the University of Toronto to see if they would have any impact on capturing these microfibers and keeping them out of our water. And in fact, the University of Toronto team would go into the wastewater treatment plant, take samples before we put the filters in place and afterwards, and then report on what the effectiveness in a community these filters might have on the water quality. We added onto this project a Great Lakes cleanup effort where we would also recruit volunteers and go out along the shore and pick up garbage. And in the first 6 months of the implementation of these filters, we were able to keep out of Georgian Bay 3 to 6 million microfibers per day by just having these filters installed on washing machines. And interestingly, after we collect this stuff from the filters, the volunteers collect it in little bags, and then we ship those bags down to the University of Toronto, and they actually look through it and characterize that fiber by fiber in a very meticulous and labor-intensive way. And that report will be a peer-reviewed published science paper when we're finished with it next year. We also created a new program last summer, which we kicked off with a bit of a contest called Families for Change. And this is to try to internalize some of the behaviors that we were seeing that did impact the bay, such as washing clothes or different choices of fashion, different types of fabrics that people were choosing to purchase in their clothing choices. We wanted a way to communicate out to the community that it could have an impact through the choices that it was making. And so in the first year of providing some suggestions for actions that people could undertake, we actually were able to catalog almost 3,000 acts through this Families for Change program. That was so successful that we've decided to continue that program. And this summer, we have a few more suggestions that we've provided to our public. We also were able to engage about 108 adults and some children to go out on some shoreline cleanups. And we were seeing this kind of garbage when we would be at those cleanups. You'll notice a lot of plastic and a lot of foam in this picture here. Here's a picture of some of our young recruits, the trash team recruits that we've got, who this year have already done a shoreline cleanup at their cottage property. And we are also organizing this summer more cleanup opportunities. This is an example of one of our first ones coming up next week at Bomb Beach in Tiny Township in partnership with the Township of Tiny. So we will obviously be implementing physical distancing appropriately to make sure that everybody stays safe. But this is a project that is just the beginning of our trash pickups this year. Not only do we pick up the garbage, but we also do science on what we find. So we do characterize all of the waste that we're collecting, and you'll see here on the right, balloons and pop cans and coffee cup lids and straws, etc., all the way over to the expected cigarette butts that I showed you previously. But one surprising finding was that we were picking up an enormous amount of foam particle. Styrofoam, extruded polystyrene, or expanded polystyrene particles. And when we saw that, we realized again that there was something that needed to be addressed that wasn't going to be captured by a washing machine filter. So we undertook to develop a program to take this data, do some investigation scientifically, and then come up with some way of involving the community to solve this problem. The idea is that we think the source of this pollution is coming from docks and dock foam that's exposed and chewed by different critters out in our environment who get in and try to make nests in our docking material. And if that expanded or extruded polystyrene is exposed and not encased somehow, then it's easy for those animals to chew it into small bits and it ends up in our environment. It can also be broken up mechanically. But we don't have the best solution or a final solution picked yet. This is a process that we're in. So right now we're trying to drive awareness and solicit expertise from dock designers and material scientists, communicating with the public, communicating with our communities, and communicating with our municipal governments to try to solve this problem. So thanks to you and your support, we are moving from simply identifying problems to actually trying to solve the problems and find solutions and mitigation strategies that can help our communities and our citizens around Georgian Bay protect our water. This was a scientific paper that we had Lisa Ertl from the University of Toronto pull together for us so that we could provide decision makers with science to show whether or not there was a problem with this polystyrene foam from an environmental perspective. We've created a Say No to Dock Foam committee from the Woods Bay area all the way down to Collingwood. We have members, and these folks do a lot of the research and outreach efforts to deal with the governments and try to move this issue to a resolution. So we're really excited about having issues-based work groups like this come together and try to solve these problems. Again, we couldn't do this without your help. You're producing the science that we need in order to support these sound decisions. And one other exciting project that I mentioned earlier is this idea of getting plastics out of the Great Lakes. This is some signage that we've produced in partnership with the town of Collingwood, where we're going to be installing 3 sea bins. You can think of these devices as great big pool skimmers, and they basically take the materials that might be on the surface of the water and suck them into the device. And then we have staff or volunteers come down periodically and empty these out. And when we empty them out, we also again characterize the type of materials that are being trapped, whether it's plastic water bottles or polystyrene foam or straws or whatever it may be, so that we can come up with strategies to help the community mitigate the specific problems that they are experiencing. We have 3 of these going in this summer. We're happy that we've just started to partner with the Council of the Great Lakes Region and Pollution Probe on a Great Lakes wide project that they've got underway, and we will be focusing and helping them in the Georgian Bay deployments. It's our mission to drive understanding about the issues that will impact our public's appreciation of Georgian Bay. And I just wanted to show you some statistics with a few of the methods that we're using to get the message out. So in 2019, we actually had a total of 5,156 followers on our social media platforms, and that was a 17% increase over the previous year. When we talk about impressions on those platforms, we made almost 200,000 impressions on Facebook with our posts and reposts of the materials that we put up. We also on Twitter had about 55,000 impressions, which is pretty amazing for us. We've got 43 videos that are posted up on YouTube right now. Last year we had about 176 viewing hours. And I mentioned that we have done now a water levels webinar as part of our response to the COVID situation. It's a 1-hour-long video, and we've already had 2,000 views of that video on YouTube. So that could be one of the first kind of go viral opportunities for Georgian Bay Forever messaging, and we're quite pleased about that. We do print 3 newsletters each year, which reach about 10,000 people. And we also send out about 8,000 emails that include information which may link back to more detailed information on our website. The issues-based newsletters that we produce are very high quality. Our community does, at this point in time, still like to have a printed newsletter in its hands, but we do make it available electronically also. And you'll notice from these titles that are flashing up on your screen that we've covered many topics over the years, from water levels to Asian carp to what's contaminating the fish to the importance of biodiversity and ending frag on the eastern coast, and also the impacts of aquaculture. And again, cumulatively, we've had about 1,500 Georgian Bay water guardians. We've educated people to become guardians of our water. We've got about 1,500 Phragmites stands that we've mapped, some of which we've now eradicated and others we're managing. We've created 42 partnerships to protect Georgian Bay. We've removed almost 100 30,000 kilograms of Phragmites, which is a lot of work, I can tell you, over the years. We've received donations in time of about 18,000 hours from our community volunteers, which is an amazing testament to the dedication and passion of our communities. And we ourselves have also invested about 860 hours of in-kind support for projects that we are working on with our partners, their projects that we are helping them with. So thanks to all of our partners. I wanted to let this list just scroll past you. You'll see that there are many, many different organizations that we've worked with over the years. We are grateful for the relationships that are ongoing with all of those organizations, as well as some of our corporate funders, in addition to you generous folks that are on the line here in this exclusive webinar. But I will turn over the microphone to Anne Randall, who is a former chair of Georgian Bay Forever and currently leads our fundraising committee. So Anne.
Thank you, David. I'll just start by talking about this interesting picture. I was asked to provide a picture of me relating to Georgian Bay on the bay, and I decided to send one in that's me in the bay, the best place to be, especially on these hot summer days we've had lately. I am fortunate to have spent the last 42 years in Point Barrel, raising my kids and now my grandkids. And I know that many of you will agree that it's the best place ever. Absolutely. David, I want to thank you for your fabulous presentation. And I have to tell you all that I'm feeling pretty proud right now of all the things that Georgian Bay Forever has accomplished over the last 25 years and all the amazing things we have going on right now. I think that we are a small but mighty charity that is doing some incredible things to make sure that Georgian Bay and the water of Georgian Bay is around for many, many, many years to come. For our, we like to say, for our kids, and far beyond that. So thank you, David, for pulling together such a great presentation that really celebrates our last 25 years. And on that note, we certainly couldn't have done any of this without the help of our important donors who care about the Bay the same way that we do. And I'd also like to acknowledge our US friends, and I'm not sure if there are any on the line right now, but most of them who cannot be on the Bay this year. And I know that that's really difficult because we're all living in difficult times. Most importantly, I want to talk about the importance of the ongoing support. Thank you to all of you for everything you've done over the years. And you can see that we have a lot of great things that have happened only as a result of our donors. We do not receive government funding. Everything we do is as a result of donations that come from many of you. So we thank you again and remind you that we hope that we can have this going forward because it's a really important part of being able to do what we do. Lots of different ways to give, and I would encourage you to call Amber, and you'll see her number at the end of the webinar because she has all the answers to your questions about how to give and different ways to give.